Alright, let me get this straight here. Alright, I'm back. So that's the path that leads to the devil's stomping ground. And here's the rest of the story. Okay. So it says, most recently a sign was posted at the site renaming the devil's tramping ground as the Chatham County Vortex and claiming that the site is the anchor of a Magdalene crystal column of energy. Magdalene energy is an idea that has emerged out of England in the past decade. This theory proposes that the planet is surrounded by a web of divine Mayray energy that is an expression of a divine feminine presence, bundling this idea with earlier English traditions of Jesus traveling to the British Isles at some point in his life, while also incorporating this into a mysticism based on Jungian psychology and feminist readings of Arthurian legend. So there's a lot going on there, but what might be most interesting for the history of the Devil's Tramping Ground in all of this is that for the first time the spot is being associated with positive supernatural forces instead of negative ones. The sort of rereading is one of the things that makes Devil's Tramping Ground such an interesting spot. It's an example of how once a place is identified as being supernatural or holy, that identification can persist even beyond the culture that credited the original association. The idea of sacred place persists, even as what this sacredness means is reinterpreted as new cultures and new contexts move into the area. So, anyway, I want to say that there is, here we go. The original naming of the Devil's Tramping Ground is part of a deep American folk tradition. The devil seems to have come to Chatham County with Scotch-Irish settlers who arrived in North Carolina during the 18th century, populating, of course, the Cape Fear River, the Uharis, and the Appalachians. The settlers were mainly immigrants from Ulster and the counties along the border between England and Scotland, and devil was very much a part of the culture they brought along with them. Obsession with the supernatural has been running at a peak in parts of the United Kingdom for a long time before the bulk of the Scottish-Irish immigration to the New World. Scottish-born James I, who ascended to the unified throne of England and Scotland in 1603, was obsessed with witches and demons, and even wrote a book on demonology, knowing a crowd pleaser when he saw it, and knowing who was the right crowd to please. William Shakespeare is said to have written the supernatural elements of Macbeth with an eye towards the superstitious king. Belief in witches, ghosts, and goblins was a genuine cultural fixation, and this demon haunted the world came with those settlers to America. Okay, so much of Southern American folklore and folk music owes its shape to the Scottish-Irish, and the devil was a central part of the story. The culture remains with us also in our place names for the Scottish-Irish. Any strange or dangerous place would often be named the devil for the devil. These names are all over North Carolina. Apart from the Devil's Tramping Ground, North Carolina has a Devil's Rock, a Devil's Courthouse, 7 Devils, Kill Devil Hills, Devil's Branch, Devil's Chimney, Devil's Nest, 4 Devil's Elbows, 2 Devil's Forks, a Devil's Knob, and even the Devil's Tater Patch. For whatever reason, this small barren patch in the woods was at some point identified as being in some way supernatural, and as cultural context around the spot has shifted, that idea has persisted even as stories around around it have changed. Boy, I didn't know this goes on. Okay. In the Scottish Irish tradition that originally named the spot the devil is. Oops, hold on. Now I went too far, and hopefully I don't run out of space again. Alright. The devil is a complicated character who's seen as often as a comic figure as he is an extraterrestrial threat to human existence. There are numerous stories the devil being outsmarted by mortals who tricked him into using his powers against himself. This complexity has perhaps sadly diminished quite a bit since the Devil's Trampling Ground was first named. Our expectations for the devil have changed, and the convergence of popular culture folklore has played a large role in this. After 40 years of movies like The Exorcist, the devil bothers to make the trip to the surface. We're counting on him to do something more impressive than just walk around in a circle. This may be part of the reason why the stories around the spot have shifted so much in recent years, and so that the threat, the devil in the woods, has been replaced with other threats. The interpretation of the site had been seen through a lens of dark powers associated with Native Americans and much of white American folklore, where the complexities of guilt and need to establish psychological legitimacy to the taking of native lands often cast the first inhabitants of the country as a supernatural force that's needed to be eliminated. Stories which give a sense of legitimization to the European possession of the land. Okay, guys, so that I don't run out of... I'll show you the photo here. But as I guess that's the road that goes to it. But then we've got... So this is kind of a long story. Because of similarity, the story of the Devil's Trampling Ground as a site for a UFO landing may be a way of dealing with the cold anxieties of rapid changes in technology, social structure. In the later 20th century, the threat of uncontrollable forces that could completely disrupt someone's life shifted cultural context through life was experienced shifted. The threat went from being demons to being aliens to unseen forces, changed from magic to radiation. Through it all, the mystical spot in the woods in Chatham County remained. Whether or not the latest incarnation of the Devil's Trampling Ground as a source of Magellan crystal energy will persist, and from outer space again. Whether or not it shifted enough, the culture shifted enough, the feared idea of supernatural forces now embraced remains to be seen. Okay, that's all I can do, guys, because of this phone.